There's a moment that almost no one talks about. Not when the lights go out, not when the first image appears, but after the credits finish rolling, when the screen goes black and something feels wrong. Not fear, not shock, something quieter, heavier, a thought you don't want to finish. You didn't enjoy what you just watched. You didn't feel thrilled. You don't even feel scared anymore. You feel like you crossed a line. Some horror films don't chase screams. They don't rely on monsters or blood or sudden violence. They wait. They let you sit with what you've seen. They make you question why you kept watching. And worse, what it says about you that you didn't stop. These are the films people hesitate to recommend. The ones that don't come with nostalgia or excitement, only warnings. Movies that leave viewers quiet, defensive, uneasy. Films that don't fade with time because they don't live in memory. They linger in conscience. Audiences didn't walk out terrified. They walked out unsettled, some angry, some ashamed, some unable to explain what bothered them, only that it did. Because the horror wasn't on screen anymore, it followed them home. Tonight, this isn't about the scariest films ever made. It's about the ones that broke something. The ones people regret watching, not because they were extreme, but because they revealed something they weren't ready to see. When horror stops being entertainment and becomes a mirror, would you like me to continue? 1. Salo, or the 120 Days of Sodom, 1975. This is the film people warn each other about quietly. Salo doesn't seek engagement or entertainment. It presents its horrors with cold formality, daring the audience to continue without offering any emotional justification. There is no arc toward redemption, no moral triumph waiting at the end. Only endurance. What breaks viewers isn't the extremity alone, it's the absence of relief. The film never signals when it's acceptable to look away. And when it finally ends, there is no sense of completion, only exposure. Regret arrives immediately, often accompanied by the same question, spoken or unspoken. Why did I need to see that? The film doesn't answer. It doesn't argue its case. It simply exists, leaving the audience to reconcile the experience on their own. For many, Salo isn't a film they hate. It's a film they wish they could forget. 2. The Vanishing, 1988. This is a film that denies the one thing audiences expect most release. The Vanishing builds its horror patiently, almost kindly, before stripping away any illusion of mercy. It doesn't threaten with chaos or spectacle. It offers certainty, and that certainty becomes unbearable. Viewers often report a delayed reaction, while watching the film feels controlled, even restrained. It's only afterward, sometimes much later, that the weight settles in. The ending doesn't explode. It seals. It closes a door and refuses to reopen it. Regret comes not from fear, but from knowledge, the kind you can't unlearn. The film doesn't shock the audience into screaming. It leaves them carrying an understanding they never asked for. Many wish they had never seen it, not because it was too much, but because it was final. 3. Angst, 1983. Angst doesn't frighten by surprise. It violates by proximity. The camera refuses distance. It clings to its subject with an intimacy that feels intrusive, almost accusatory. There is no framing that offers safety, no stylistic cushion that signals fiction. The audience isn't guided. They're dragged, forced to witness actions without the comfort of commentary or moral scaffolding. What unsettles viewers most is not the brutality itself, but the perspective. The film denies the usual cues that allow condemnation to feel clean. Instead, it traps the audience inside a relentless point of view, creating an experience many describe as suffocating rather than suspenseful. Regret follows quickly, not because the film shocks, but because it implicates. Watching it can feel like participation, even when logic insists otherwise. The discomfort lingers as a question no one wants to answer. Why did I keep watching when I knew it was wrong? 4. Eraserhead, 1977. There is no clear way to explain Eraserhead, and that is part of its damage. The film operates on dream logic, where images replace meaning and discomfort replaces narrative. Sounds hum endlessly. Spaces feel hostile. Familiar human experiences are distorted into something unrecognizable and deeply unsettling. Many viewers initially approach the film with curiosity, even amusement. That reaction rarely lasts. As the imagery repeats and intensifies, the experience becomes oppressive. The film doesn't escalate, it suffocates. Regret doesn't come from fear, but from endurance. The realization that the film demands submission to its logic, not understanding. Those who finish it often struggle to articulate what disturbed them most, only that something felt profoundly wrong. Eraserhead doesn't linger because it explains anything. It lingers because it refuses to. 5. Possession, 1981. Possession doesn't ask to be understood. It dares the audience to endure it. The film is emotionally violent in a way that resists interpretation. Performances erupt without warning. Conversations collapse into screams. Meaning fractures then refuses to be rebuilt. Watching it can feel less like following a story and more like standing inside someone else's breakdown. What causes regret isn't confusion, it's exposure. The film offers no safe distance. Pain isn't symbolic. It's raw, sustained, and confrontational. Viewers aren't guided toward insight. They're left to absorb intensity without explanation. Many people describe finishing the film exhausted, unsettled, even embarrassed by how overwhelmed they felt. Not because the film tricked them, but because it showed too much, too honestly. The horror here isn't hidden. It's relentless. And once experienced, it's difficult to forget how deeply it intruded. 6. The Tenant, 1976. The fear in The Tenant doesn't arrive suddenly. It accumulates. The film invites the audience to observe a man being slowly absorbed by a space that refuses to recognize him as an individual. Walls listen. Neighbors watch. Rules exist, but no one explains where they came from or who they protect. Identity erodes not through violence, but through repetition and pressure. What unsettles viewers is how reasonable everything appears at first. Each small compromise feels logical. Each surrender feels temporary. And by the time the transformation is undeniable, it's already complete. The audience realizes they've been accepting the same logic step by step. The regret emerges from recognition, not of a monster, but of a process. The uncomfortable awareness that loss of self doesn't require force, only compliance. Many viewers leave the film disturbed not by what happened, but by how easily it made sense while it was happening. 7. Symptoms, 1974. There is something deeply isolating about Symptoms even when you're not watching it alone. The film is restrained to the point of near silence. Emotions are muted. Explanations are withheld. What unfolds feels less like a narrative and more like a slow closing in. Nothing pushes forward. Everything presses inward. Audiences frequently describe a creeping sense of intrusion as if they were observing a private unraveling they weren't meant to witness. The camera doesn't dramatize, it lingers. And that lingering becomes uncomfortable. Unlike films that shock and release, Symptoms offers no release at all. It ends not with resolution, but with a sense of emotional abandonment, leaving viewers to carry the weight of what they've seen without guidance. The regret isn't fear-based, it's situational. The feeling that this was not meant to be experienced, only endured. 8. Let's Scare Jessica to Death, 1971. This is a film built almost entirely on hesitation. Let's Scare Jessica to Death never confirms its threat. It surrounds the audience with uncertainty and asks them to live inside it. Is something wrong, or is the fear itself the problem? The film refuses to decide. Viewers often describe feeling embarrassed by how tense they became. Not because anything overt happened, but because the atmosphere encouraged paranoia. Every sound feels suspect. Every pause feels intentional. The audience becomes hyper-aware of its own reactions. What makes the experience uncomfortable is the lack of resolution. The film doesn't validate the fear, but it doesn't dismiss it either. It leaves the viewer suspended between explanation and belief. For many, the regret comes from recognizing how easily anxiety took hold. Not because the film manipulated them aggressively, but because it barely had to try. 9. Images, 1972. Images doesn't frighten by intrusion. It unsettles by erosion. The film places the audience inside a mind that cannot be trusted, then removes the markers that usually tell us what is real and what isn't. Scenes slide into one another without warning. Faces reappear with subtle differences. Certainty dissolves quietly, almost politely. What many viewers find disturbing is how long they try to keep up. They attempt to solve the film, to map its logic, to regain control. And somewhere along the way, that effort becomes exhausting. The film doesn't reward interpretation. It lets confusion stand. By the end, the unease isn't about the character's perception, it's about the viewer's own. The lingering discomfort comes from realizing how easily one accepts instability when it's presented calmly enough. The regret doesn't arrive during the film. It arrives later, when the images return uninvited, stripped of context, and the mind tries unsuccessfully to put them back in order. 10. Don't Look Now, 1973. Few films create regret not through fear, but through grief. Don't Look Now unsettles audiences by weaving horror into something far more personal: loss that refuses to stay buried. The film doesn't exploit tragedy, it lives inside it. And for some viewers, that closeness becomes overwhelming. What makes the experience difficult isn't what happens, but how it feels to remember. The film triggers associations people didn't expect: moments, faces, emotions they thought were safely locked away. Horror becomes secondary to something quieter and more invasive. Many viewers finish the film not shaken, but hollowed. The imagery lingers, not because it's violent, but because it resonates too closely with real pain. Watching it can feel less like entertainment and more like reopening something that had finally begun to heal. The regret comes afterward, not from being scared, but from realizing the film knew exactly where to touch. 11. The Appointment, 1981. There are no moments in The Appointment that tell you when to be afraid. The film moves slowly, almost cautiously, constructing its tension from absence rather than action. Conversations feel slightly off. Spaces feel too empty. Time seems to stretch without explanation. And through it all, nothing openly announces itself as horror. That restraint is precisely what makes the experience so unsettling. Viewers aren't shocked into fear, they're eased into unease. The film asks them to wait, to anticipate, to notice patterns that may or may not mean anything at all. Many audience members describe the same reaction after finishing it, a sense that something happened, but they can't quite name what. The discomfort doesn't come from events, but from atmosphere, an impression that reality itself shifted slightly, then refused to correct itself. Regret follows not from terror, but from disorientation. The feeling that the film took something intangible, certainty, rhythm, trust in cause and effect, and never gave it back. 12. The Witch Who Came from the Sea, 1976. This is not a film that asks for sympathy or offers it easily. It places the audience in an impossible position and refuses to guide them out. The Witch Who Came from the Sea confronts viewers with a character whose trauma is neither distant nor abstract. The film doesn't package her suffering into a cautionary tale or a clean psychological arc. It lets it leak unevenly, uncomfortably into every interaction, every moment of silence. What unsettles many viewers is how the film blurs the boundary between understanding and excuse. The audience is invited close enough to recognize the damage, but never given permission to resolve it emotionally. Compassion becomes complicated. Judgment becomes unstable. For some, the regret comes later, after realizing how much they tolerated while watching. Not because the film demanded it, but because it never stopped them. It trusted the audience to decide where the line was, then quietly watched as they crossed it. The horror here isn't spectacle, it's proximity. And the lingering question of whether witnessing suffering without intervention changes the witness. 13. The Baby, 1973. There is a point in The Baby where many viewers realize they want to stop watching, but don't. Not because the film is fast or aggressive, but because it feels deeply, unmistakably wrong. The premise alone creates discomfort, but the film's true power lies in how calmly it presents its world. Nothing is exaggerated. Nothing is framed as outrageous. The story unfolds with an almost casual tone, daring the audience to confront their own reactions without the safety of distance or irony. What unsettles viewers most is not the content itself, but their participation in it. The film forces them to remain present, to observe without interruption, to sit through scenes that generate unease without offering justification or release. By the time the final revelation arrives, many viewers aren't shocked. They're disturbed by something else entirely. The realization that they watched it all the way through. For years, The Baby has carried a reputation not as a film people love, but as one people feel compelled to explain. Not because it's misunderstood, but because admitting how it made them feel is far more uncomfortable than the film itself. 14. A Reflection of Fear, 73. This is a film that quietly destabilizes its audience by erasing certainty. From the outside, A Reflection of Fear appears restrained, almost polite. But beneath that surface is a steady dismantling of perspective. The film never clearly signals who deserves sympathy, who should be feared, or where responsibility truly lies. Viewers often report a strange shift midway through the film. The realization that they are no longer confident in their own reactions. Moments meant to disturb don't arrive loudly. They slip in gently wrapped in ambiguity, forcing the audience to question whether their discomfort is justified or self-created. The real damage isn't caused by what the film shows, but by what it withholds. It denies moral clarity. It denies reassurance. And when it ends, it offers no explanation strong enough to anchor the experience. Many people didn't leave scared. They left confused. And later unsettled by a more troubling thought. What if my instincts were wrong the entire time? It's the kind of film that doesn't accuse the viewer outright. It simply lets doubt do the work. 15. Blood and Lace, 1971. No one remembers Blood and Lace for its scares. They remember it for the feeling that comes later, quiet, creeping, and deeply uncomfortable. The film doesn't shock the audience with excess. Instead, it asks them to watch something intimate and painful without offering emotional distance. Trauma isn't framed as a mystery to be solved or a threat to escape. It's simply there unfolding slowly, forcing the viewer into the role of a silent witness. Many viewers describe the experience not as frightening, but invasive. As if the film had crossed a personal boundary not through violence, but through proximity. There is an unspoken question running beneath every scene. Should I be watching this? What makes the discomfort linger is the absence of relief. There is no moral balance restored, no catharsis waiting at the end. The film doesn't condemn what it shows, but it doesn't justify it either. It simply leaves the audience alone with what they've seen. For some, that silence felt heavier than any scream. Not because the film was extreme, but because it refused to tell them how to feel afterward. Bonus fact, The Devils, 1971. This is not a film people recommend. It's a film people hesitate before mentioning. The Devils occupies a strange space in horror history. Not because of what it shows, but because of how openly it confronts power belief and collective cruelty without offering moral shelter. The imagery is confrontational, but the real discomfort comes from recognition. The violence here isn't chaotic. It's organized, justified, applauded. Many viewers describe an immediate urge to distance themselves from the experience, not to debate it, not to analyze it, simply to move away. The film forces its audience to sit with the idea that atrocities don't require monsters, only systems, symbols, and permission. Regret doesn't stem from shock, but from clarity. The realization that nothing in the film feels exaggerated enough to dismiss as fantasy. Watching it can feel less like entertainment and more like an accusation, one aimed not at individuals, but at history itself. The Devils is often remembered in fragments. Not because it's forgettable, but because remembering all of it at once feels unbearable. These films weren't designed to entertain you. They weren't meant to comfort you, and they certainly weren't created to be enjoyed. They linger because they leave something unresolved, a feeling that doesn't fade, a question that refuses to settle. Have you ever finished a horror film and felt like you'd crossed a line, not because of what it showed, but because of what it revealed about you? Was the film wrong? Or was it the moment you realized you couldn't look away?